I gotta tell you, I'm so excited to be here with you guys. You know, when they ask me about this show, I'll tell you more about that. But to kind of share some thinking, you're gonna see things maybe a little differently than you think when you start looking at with cannabis and hemp. Because I'm excited about the growth of this industry in general, but to be talking to thought leaders and decision makers that have to do with all the stuff that's here at this outdoor retail show. There's amazing application to this beyond what you ever would have even thought about when you first started thinking about it. Oh, I need that. Wake up. Okay, my name is Craig Binkley. I work out of LA and Atlanta. I'll give you a little more information in a little while about why I'm up here talking about cannabis. May not be everything you expected. So I've given this speech in several places, the basics of it, and from different countries to mainstream people to industry events. And we actually call it, you know, you can see here, I didn't put it on here for you guys, but most of the world is wrong about cannabis. But cannabis and hemp will save the world anyway if we let it. I figured if I put that up there, nobody would know, right? So it's like, how do you apply it to the outdoor retail market so it has relevance to you guys? So we've done a lot of adaptation to this to make it make sense for your business, for the things you're doing, for the opportunities that you have in the broad space. I'm just going to make sure I keep on track here. You got to point this bad boy. It's in the way of the. Hello, Bueller? Anyone? We have a clicker issue. Is there a battery in this guy? There we go. So I love this visual. It's a little bit like what we're going to go through here today, you know. We're going to take a little journey through the looking glass. And you know, when people see this, you know, there's different things they think about. There's different theories about what all that means. It's that, you know, things aren't necessarily, they don't look the way they're supposed to look, or it's something you didn't know about. And when you find out a little bit more about it, you go through the rabbit hole and you go, wait, that's different than what I expected. And I think by the time you get to the end of this, hopefully you will have seen that either or both of those are true. That it's not the way you thought it was going to be, or that things that you thought could be a little bit different. There we go. So let's talk about individual journeys, sort of into the world of cannabis, because that's really the way it works. It's this individual journey, and it's a great metaphor to think about, because not only are consumers, I mean, those of you that live in Colorado, you've seen it. It's like there's a journey. It's like people come, they start at different levels. There's a progression. There's segmentation. There's, you know, canna curious. There's, you know, canna connoisseurs. There's all this different kind of stuff you go through. I gave this speech at CBD.io to CBD almost exclusive people in Vegas a couple months ago. And there was a survey of the people that were at that event. And something like 70% of them were in the industry because of some personal connection. It meant that they had a family member that had cancer, was going through some things. They had some, you know, people with pain issues. They were looking at it. And what that means to me is that the people in the industry have a much deeper purpose, right? They're still trying to make money. It's a money thing, you know, it's, you know, .com 2.0 from a financial standpoint. We've seen that this year. But essentially, it means that people care about what they're doing, right? And that's a lot to do with why you see so many great people in the business doing the kind of things they're doing. And so my journey to this was, I'm not the cannabis guy. I wasn't the cannabis guy. I worked at Coca-Cola, a lot of companies around the world, and I'm on the board of a company in Canada that makes non-alcoholic beer and wine. And so we basically make that for what we call the mandatories, people who can't have alcohol, right? So liver problems, heart association, cancer, things like that. And then we work with those associations to get their list of people so that we can actually get those products marketed to them. And it takes the whole personality of like, screw cancer, I'm gonna have a great rosé, right? And so we make that. And so the attitude very much fits. And at the end of 2017, Constellation put 250 million Canadian into canopy growth. Now it's billions. It's now like McDonald's money, but at the time, the world stood up and took notice. California was going to legalize, Canada was going to legalize, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, I know those guys. And so it's like, wait a minute, this is a real deal. And so we started getting calls about infusing cannabis into our non-alcoholic beer line. Because you can put alcohol and THC together, but if THC is a replacement for alcohol, could we do that? And I said, how would you do that? Like steep tea leaves? I mean, I have no idea. I just couldn't imagine how you would do that because I didn't have the mental model of what the extraction was going to be or things like that. I put calcium in orange juice like 3.5 decades ago. So, we knew about putting functional ingredients into a beverage. I just never thought about cannabis being one of those beverages by any stretch. And so that sort of got me into the business. And so what we did was came to Colorado 2 years ago and came to see Deseo and walked around. I came with a friend of mine from California that used to work with me at Minute Maid, the agricultural juice side of things, and said, everything that we know is going to be relevant here. CPG skills, brands, all that stuff. And he lived in California. Then I have another friend that runs a contact call center, inbound, outbound, for all the pharmaceutical companies. He's doing it for decades. He happened to be a really smart cannabis person. His son's sort of on the spectrum and has been using cannabis and things like that. And so we came to Colorado together. As I say, I didn't come to cannabis came to me. So the universe sort of like shoved it all at me. Because we came to see Deseo. Then we went to a meeting in Philadelphia with some people that we had met. And it turns out that there's this group called Athletes for Care, a bunch of NHL and NFL and NBA, very great athletes that are advocating for changes to, they're saying we should have been given CBD for anti-concussion as part of, prophylactic. It shouldn't be a problem for athletes. They should be actually getting this, given what we're seeing with all the opiates, et cetera. And then we found out that Lindy Snyder, who's on the board of that, was also on the board of Montel's foundation. I'd met Montel in LaGuardia, and we talked about his advocacy stuff years before. And then these guys start talking about Sanjay Gupta's doing pot versus pills, and I'm like, well, I never Sanjay Gupta. He was in Atlanta. I live in Atlanta. I didn't know he was doing that. And then a friend of mine introduces me to Belushi and says, you need to talk to Craig about branding. I'm in his house with his dog Cash and his daughter. We're talking about his brother John dying. And so all this stuff just started saying, wait a minute, I think you're supposed to do something here. And so I started looking at it and I said, well, what could I do? And then I had been fortunate enough. I started, I was a Coca-Cola guy. I've actually worked at Pepsi as well, which is why my spine is fused. I slept in a hotel, and that was the gods of Coca-Cola basically saying, thou shalt not consult with Pepsi. And so I've worked in foods, with Conagra Foods, Campbell's, Hershey's, all these companies, beverages, the pharma medical side. I've worked for Pfizer, Novartis, Sanofi, so I understand phase 1, 2, 3 clinicals, how OTC health works, supplements, claims, and then alcoholic beverages. I've run those things all over the world, and by the way, that's a lot like cannabis. It's prohibition, then it's not, it's legal. You have a framework, you have state level regulations, you have multi-tiered, distribution, controlled access, adults, and all that kind of stuff. Why won't those models work? I've been in those places. I come out of agriculture, Minute Maid, Orange Grove, Conagra Foods had food ingredients, we work in food ingredients, and then we'll talk about a little bit today is I work with Dow and Alcoa, putting different composite materials and plastics and aluminums into building and construction and automobiles. So those industries as well, and then animal health even. What happens with animal health? So I said, you know what? Actually, I think I understand how these industries work, and maybe I can help the cannabis people understand what they need to know about those industries and kind of meet them all halfway. Because I walked in and I said, I think the industry's being done wrong. My favorite expression was I went to the shows and I said, everybody's talking about recreational use. And as a marketing guy, every word matters, right? I changed Diet Coke to Coca-Cola Light for a reason, right? The words matter. And I said, why would you call it recreational? Because recreation is like swing sets, teeter-totters, and little kids. We would never call Grey Goose a recreational beverage. It's controlled adult social use. I mean, all the words matter. So if you're trying to mainstream it, you're trying to get the broader public to understand and empathize with you, well, you can't spend time talking about recreation because you're just teeing up all the images of Spicoli that they've got in their head. And so we started looking at it and saying, I think we could do some things differently. And so what I do is I look at it and I say, how can we accelerate the positive impact of cannabis and hemp to mainstream consumers and mainstream markets around the world? How can we take this thing, which is called the vice category, when the reality is it's a virtue plant? Why is it seen as a vice plant? Okay, so can it go from vice to virtue? It has nothing to do with the media company, by the way. Ironically, I just came up with that one, Jason. It's like 2 days old. So what did I do? I connected with guys like this, right? I connected with sort of the best people in the industries that do the different things. And I said, let's get the best people, the legacy cannabis knowledge, because I didn't know anything. I was the guy talking about steeping cannabis in tea, tea bags or something. And so I went with the best people, met them all. We built a unique function of cannabis and real-world CPG experience to kind of blend those two together in the companies we were building together. Designed brands and commercial systems. So we worked on the supply chain, making products, designing products, laboratories, testing the whole deal, getting to market distribution channels, understanding that. Working with people, in the industry, the best people, and then being trusted by partners, including Ad Age, Licensing Expo, Entrepreneur Magazine, to be the trusted people that are going to help navigate mainstream companies. When you go to Ad Week, it's not cannabis companies. Sure, we go to cannabis shows, but everybody there's talking about the same stuff. We go to shows like this. We're not talking about cannabis. We go to Licensing Expo. We go to Ad Week and talk about that on a global basis to people that actually are not in the industry and are busy in their own industry and not thinking about what we're talking about here. And so we're basically working at the intersection, because the problem with cannabis, one of the problems with cannabis, is A, it's really complex, but B, there's still a whole lot of sort of outlaw stuff going on. As we all know, 2 wrongs don't make a right. 3 rights make a left. Half truth from one person and a half truth to the other does not make the whole truth. And so the thing with cannabis, there's a lot of truth going around, which is not really true, because everybody's got their own agenda. And so these are 3 of the companies I've ended up working the most with. Prohibited, which is the media company that we were all talking about. We built brands there under Future State. Cannabis BPO, which is what we built as a medical side contact call center business for chats, for all the dispensaries, for consumers, for information. Working with, we work with orphan drugs. 1-800. When you dial that number, that's these guys, right? And then Ingredient Alliance, where we're building compounds of the different cannabinoids together into different form factors and into different uses of hemp. So this is how I got into the business and why I talk about it. So how many of you guys know a lot about cannabis? I think you have a fair amount. Well, I've seen how many years. Most of you don't know that much. I'm just trying to, because there's 101, there's 201, there's 701, it's like math, right? Nobody remembers this from school, right? I certainly don't. The only domain I know about is like my website. But if you go all the way down, sort of the issue with cannabis is hemp is cannabis and cannabis is hemp, which is what makes it so damn kind of confusing, right? Because how do you know what's what? And this is what's led to a lot of different pieces. And if you got to go all the way down these things, the phylums and classes, and at the family, it's called the hemp family, which also happens to be called cannabis here. It's like it's cannabis and hemp at the same time. You can't separate them. They're the same damn thing. All the way down to cannabis L, the wonky thing with the thing there. Cannabis sativa. So what happens is, by the time you get down to the species, this is the only place that cannabis is hemp and hemp is cannabis starts to take you in a different direction. And it's a result of the cannabinoids. So cannabinoids are the molecular structures, all the things, more than 100 that come out of the plant. Okay, it's all the beneficial stuff, like any plant. By the way, they come out of other stuff too. And so essentially, there's 2 species. It's at the species level, right? You have basically what we'll call, what we call sort of, and it's not right, by the way, but it's the way the market's moving, it's the way the public conversation's moving. So you just need to lean into that and say, okay, let's call this one marijuana and that one's hemp. It's not correct, but just for now, let's just kind of do that to keep people separate, because you have to be able to, in your head, understand the difference between A and B to kind of go down the rest of the track. Now, this was, it's only 2. If we're talking about azaleas, there's 10,000, right? So it's only 2. How hard could it be? There's only 2. And so we ought to be able to keep these things straight. So here's a little bit of just background about, what's different. These two, we call them canna cousins, right? And so if you go through, you can see the difference here. It's basically, this is what we'll call marijuana cannabis, plants are anyway, and that we'll call hemp. Let's call this hemp, and cannabis, but let's do marijuana and hemp to keep it clear, right? And so essentially you basically see here, marijuana cannabis has cannabinoids, right? Well, so does hemp cannabis, they both have cannabinoids. The difference is marijuana cannabis has THC, which is the euphoric psychoactive effect. It's the cannabinoid out of the hundreds that actually creates what we'll call the effect, okay, for people. We'll call it a high, different thing. And the plant itself, the crop, the agricultural side of it, is cultivated for THC uses. It grows short and bushy and flowery, and you work the sun and you clip it and you trim it because we're trying to maximize the flower because that's where the THC is you're getting, okay? On the other side, hemp cannabis has less than 0.3% THC, so it has no psychoactive impact. And it's cultivated for hemp uses, for flowers, for seeds, for stalks, for leaves. It's basically an agricultural piece, and you grow it the same way, and it grows very tall and stalky. I mean, you can see the difference between them when they grow. So they're two different things. And now we start to see what the difference between them is. And I think what's interesting is we look at really the past 2 years of just unbelievable acceleration in the development of the marketplace. It's important to understand a little bit for the story and for the perception of the industry, how the hell did we get here, right? And it goes all the way back, let's go back in time, like 6,000 years, right? Hemp was one of the earliest and most domesticated crops in the world. In the world. I mean, George Washington, look here, George Washington, reasonably reputable guy in his time, I'm gonna say. Okay, so if George Washington could talk about hemp as being a good thing, I don't feel so bad about the Coca-Cola guy getting up there and talking about hemp being okay. So why should we think it's so bad? Well, what happened then, fast forward to the Marijuana Tax Act. So for those of you who were not around in 1937, which is most of you, there was no internet, there was no YouTube, no Spotify. And so what you had was a newspaper. People used to have these things called newspapers. For those of you that are younger, there used to be a thing called newspaper. And so that was run by Hearst, right? Well, what did Hearst also have? Pulp mills, plants, trees, paper, right? All the things that competed with him. And then his friend DuPont had just discovered nylon. All the other things that people were doing with hemp. And so all of a sudden there's this whole idea. So we call this sort of misdirection number one on the ability of hemp to do what it's been doing for 6,000 years. We'll just call it for now propaganda, okay? And that leads you to the Marijuana Tax Act. So what happens is, all of a sudden, the thing gets rat packed. It's like if your third cousin on your mom's side robbed the bank, okay? They throw your entire family in jail, and you weren't even driving their car. So that's what happened. You saw there's two species, they both got thrown in the same time. They must be the same. They're both called cannabis, they're both called hemp, just throw them both in jail. You and your cousin have the same last name, boom, away you go. So then what happens? Well, hemp must not be too bad, because guess what? When we go to war again, now we all need hemp. Just like Washington said, everybody should grow hemp. All of a sudden we're at war, and it's like, oh, geez, we need hemp, we need stuff, we need textiles, we need fabrics, we get all these materials that we can make from hemp. Let's go back, let's take it out of jail, let's give it probation. As soon as the war's over, they throw it back in. It's not probation, it's basically just a little bit of like a weekend off or something. And so now hemp is thrown right back in jail again after the war. Then we get Tricky Dick in 1970, so we get Controlled Substances Act. This, for those of you who don't know, is where we created the schedules, right? The DEA, all the stuff's created. This is literally off the DEA website. So those of you who don't know this, basically, it created the schedules. So Schedule 1, you can just say what it says. No currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. That's bad. Okay, just read those words. That's bad stuff, right? What's in there? Heroin, that's bad. LSD, probably not very good. Ecstasy, meth peyote. Oh, wait, cannabis is up there. You say, okay, what's number 2? What's bad too? High potential for abuse. Maybe psychological or physical dependencies. So what's in there? Oh, let's see. Oh, Percocet, cocaine, meth, Demerol, Oxy, fentanyl. Last I checked, that's all the stuff that's killing more people every day in this country than cars and guns. And it's safer than what George Washington was growing. That's literally that's true. I mean, hemp was sitting there underneath cocaine, LSD, ecstasy, and everything as more dangerous. Hemp, the thing we just talked about, 50,000, ropes and cotton and stuff like that. That's just insane, but that's what happened. So then we fast forward to 1996, and our friends in California, which is where I live now, the Compassionate Use Act. So what happens after Compassionate Use Act is the whole narrative and conversation becomes legalizing. Legalize weed. But the focus of the conversation was around the medical benefits for medical use, or the adult social context of it's my weed, I should be able to get it, right? Nobody's talking about making rope, making textiles, making boots, making snowmobiles. We're talking about the application from a medical therapeutic side. If you think about those two sides, you sort of have a therapeutic component to it, which is all the things that are sort of medicinal related, and you have this whole industrial side, which was introduced to me by a bunch of Stanford kids, by the way. I knew nothing about that either. And so you look at this and you say, what happens next? Legalize it, legalize it, legalize it. So this is where we are now. So if you look at the progression, you can tell how fast it moved from 1996 with California to where we are now in today, which is Todos los días están aquí today. We had a little bit of we had to switch computers. I think some fonts are going to be wonky here. And so now we got to the point where after Illinois, we're like at 34 and 11, right? So all of a sudden, those are public cinema. You guys have seen you don't have to watch Jimmy Kimmel or anybody to kind of understand what's going on with the political support for cannabis and legalization and all that. And remember that because of the problems, we go back to 1937, all the testing, all the things that we've done. Remember, I worked with the pharma companies. All the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical shit was illegal. Right? Even from hemp, it was illegal. You couldn't do any testing. So we're basically sitting before the starting block in the race and can't even start yet for all of those years, for 80 years. And so as you go through this, you say, okay, now we get that's the funky one I saw, right? So now we got the Agricultural Improvement Act, also known as the Farm Bill of 2018, which passes at the end of 2018, which now is more than a year ago, which is kind of weird to say. It's now 2020. And so this is what Scott said, who was at the time was the head of the FDA. These changes include removing hemp from the Controlled Substances Act, which means that it will no longer be an illegal substance under federal law. Hemp, okay, not marijuana, hemp, the hemp side. Now you can grow it, you can transport it, you can bank it, you can move it, you can sell it across the United States, which by the way you couldn't before. We're importing hemp from other countries. That's how silly it was. We're importing hemp from other countries to make a product because it was illegal here. That's how silly the whole thing is. And that's, every time I think about it, that's why I want you to the context. The whole thing just seems like you can't make that shit up. How did that actually happen? And so they get all the momentum and the positive energy and everything's rocking and rolling. You're kind of going, okay, this is great. Now you can actually, hemp is great now. Hemp is fine. Let's go focus and say, okay, now let's go back to all that great stuff. Let's go back to the Vikings and the ships and the ropes and everything else we can do with hemp and all the different things we can do now that we have the Farm Bill. And by the way, there was a massive change on the agricultural investment side of the business where people who were doing, more THC cannabis growing for dispensaries went student body left into hemp, and all of a sudden all the acreage, kind of started moving to a different place. Well, and so here are the uses. So can we get back to this stuff? These are just a couple examples. All the uses of hemp. I mean, there's a lot more to this agriculture, but I just want to kind of open your eyes and minds to it. That here's all the different parts of it. There's oils, there's seeds cake, there's nuts, the dietary supplements, body care things. And these are all the uses. Just think about, just walk that hall out there down here, which is why when they asked me to come, I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to talk to these people. Just walk at pretty much everything out there. I think the stuff out there is like textiles, there's clothing out there, there's no diapers in it. Handbags, denim, sure, why not? Industrial textiles, canvas, tarps, you guys use those in outdoors? Probably so. Paper, printing, foods, all the things we're doing, building materials, all these uses that we have for hemp. Can we please get back to it now? And the problem is, go back to this chart. These two species are different, right? Crap. Right? Very complex and medical, but the endocannabinoid system Think about it as working around your body. So when you have receptors and you get pain relief as opposed to an opiate that works on the center of your brain, which is what will kill you, cannabis will never kill anybody from taking it. You might fall asleep, wake up, have Doritos, fall back to sleep, but you would never have the stoppage of your automated functions because it's not attacking your central nerve, your brain, okay, in a very different way. So now you look and you say, okay, let's talk about CBD. Oops, sorry. So this goes into, by the way, you know what that dog is as a distraction? That's a cannabinoid. So basically, you look at the plant, it has all this stuff, right? The seeds, you got hemp oil, leaves, flower. So CBD essentially comes from more of the flower stuff. It's not the stuff we were talking about before, the stuff in the stems and the stalks and what we use to make textiles and papers and composite materials. And so what's happened really in 2019, post-Farm Bill, you're starting to see a different kind of thing. You're starting to see a splinter. It's starting to look like a pharmacological model where you're tearing down the elements that you extract from plants and you're putting them back together. That is what the pharmacological model is. And that's what's starting to happen now with CBD. So I have three sort of basic things that are coming out. So isolate is where essentially everything, all of those other cannabinoids and terpenes are extracted out of what you get from the plant. And what's left is 99% pure CBD. It's the purest you can get, and it's pure isolate. Full spectrum, on the other hand, is pretty much you extract everything out of it, and it has less than 0.3% THC, but there's going to be some in there. And what happens when you have all of these things, it's just like the concept of, you know, the sum of the parts is, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It's like they have an entourage effect, is what it's called, where they work together. They enhance each other's performance, and they do a better job together than they do separately. That's what full spectrum is. And so what's happening now is there's something in the middle ground which says, okay, let's just take the THC out. So it sort of starts from the right end over there, it's got everything in it, but then it takes the THC out. So you're getting some of the entourage effect from the other cannabinoids and terpenes, but there's no THC in it because that's the concern. So you're starting to see the THC CBD separation between the molecules, which is different than the plant. Remember, the plant, it's not just the plant, it's the molecules coming out of it. So you're starting to see how they're starting to separate a little bit. And that's where the market's starting to go on CBD. So the issue with CBD, for those of you who don't know, and I saw, by the way, there's a few, Liz was here yesterday, I think, talking about, she's great, BDS analytics, they have the data, talking about what's happening with consumers and all this stuff. There's zillions of people talking about sustainability and things like that, but I think we're the only people right here, whoever's sitting right here is the only people so far talking about this stuff as part of the sustainability program. The problem with it is it's complex. This is the specific FDA stuff. So CBD, here's the problem. This is directly from the FDA. FDA has approved only one CBD product. That is Epidiolex from GW Pharmaceuticals. They fast-tracked approved it. To some extent, they have control. My other company, we have a guy who used to be the assistant director of the FDA. We have him for a reason, right? He helps us understand all that kind of stuff. And so it's illegal to market CBD by adding it to a food or labeling it as a dietary supplement, because what happened is when you took it off of the schedule list, it moved from the DEA, who operates to control the schedules, and who was too busy with other stuff to really worry that much about him, to the FDA. So now the FDA is in control, not the DEA, and the FDA is in control of everything because of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, including topicals and food and drugs. Anything that's CBD, topical, food, drug, comes under the FDA. Now, the problem with it is the animals are already out of the barn. I mean, you just go down any street anywhere in the world almost, and you find CBD stuff, right? So they can't really police that. They're trying their best, and we'll talk more about what that means. And then they're also talking about some unproven things, unproven claims, and they're kind of telling you what they don't want you to do. They're signaling. They're doing a good job. Scott basically, he said it, and off we go. So when we're talking about the recommendations for you folks, that aren't in this business, that aren't in this industry, but need to think about if you want to get involved in it, if you want to go down your journey, it's a complex thing. It's complex versus simple. It's not difficult versus simple, it's complex versus simple. It's a bunch of simple things, but it's a billion of them, which makes it complex. And so if you think about it, my recommendation, what you have to do is you have to study. You have to study constantly because it's changing all the time. And you have to get it from reputable sources. You have to curate that stuff. I mean, we know that celebrities down the internet side. I'm not going to do that. Sorry, but there's bad news out there all the time, right? Stuff that really didn't happen. And you have to basically practice good behavior. There are a lot of people out there with bad behavior. I'm assuming everybody sitting here doing CBD has all the perfect things that we need for good behavior to give consumers the right experiences, the right information, stay in line with the FDA, all that kind of stuff. Well, that's a different situation, but basically their claim to efficacy, good manufacturing practices, testing protocols. Are you testing at every level of supply chain and manufacturing? Are you testing to make sure the end product? Are you testing after 90 days on the shelf? Because guess what? You put it out in the sun in a beverage in a clear bottle, and just like beer, it's gone. So you're not really getting any CBD, but your consumer thinks they're getting CBD, they're buying it, right? That stuff upsets the FDA. And then align your business risk. It's a risk assessment. The FDA can't control this, just like the IRS can't audit every one of us, okay? So not everybody's going to get under that. They're signaling exactly what the problems are. They're coming after people who are making ridiculous claims, having real problems with their product and things like that. And you have to align your business risk with other people you're working with. You cannot, I go to ECRM shows, all these places where I talk to all the retailers, not necessarily outdoor, but all the major retailers, the pharmacies, the grocery stores, all the people that I talk to about this stuff, sporting goods stores actually. And everybody wants to be ready for CBD when it's legal. They want to be ready. What do? Well, you get to the best people and you study the people that are what I call CBD positive. So the retailers that are CBD positive, let's talk to them. Let's see what's happening in their stores. Just like we think about, are we debriefing Colorado before we go to California? Are we debriefing California before we go to Illinois? Right? There's learning out there. Well, if these markets, these pharmacies, these shoe stores are selling CBD, how are they merchandising it? How's it working? What are consumers asking? What kind of products are they buying? The information's out there if we can collect it and give it to the Krogers and the people that are actually going to be eventually moving into this space. To align that business risk, for example, Coca-Cola got outed by Aurora, right? Coca-Cola, I love the company. James and I, the CEO, worked with me in Mexico. It took them over 100 years to dip their toe in alcohol, and they did it like far, far, far overseas. Of course, they're going to look at the CBD molecule in beverages because you can't not do that if you're a reasonably beverage company. But you don't make a big public display out of it because it's cannabis, for God's sake. The market hasn't moved yet. And the reason they got outed was because Aurora is trying to pump their stock. Oh, we're working with Coca-Cola. It's the last thing Coke wanted. So you need to align your business risk and your level of professionalism with the people that match you. I had conversations with guys I worked with, and they're like, "Oh, I've been doing this for 5 years." I'm like, "No, I'm talking to Costco and Kroger and CVS. I can't have your, weedy conversation. It's like it's a whole different world. We're over here now. The world over here operates like this, and that's where the market has to move, and that's the intersection that we live in." So now, beyond CBD. What about the C Street band, right? These other guys. CBC is sort of the forgotten one. That's the one that actually, with CBD, is the best for chronic pain, according to the only studies we've been able to do. So the whole focus on CBD means we're forgetting about all these other guys, right? CBG is the little guy. It's the one that they're looking at for, CBN. If you have trouble sleeping, you're in Colorado. Go to a dispensary, get CBN. It's magical. I mean, it's amazing, right? If we can get people off Ambien, so you don't go bake a pizza at 500 degrees and then go take a drive in your car in your pajamas, okay? That's a good thing. If you can sleep with CBN instead of Ambien, that's great. Let's do that. Good plan. And then CBG is anything from intestinal stuff to other stuff. And by the way, CBC is also, they're working with dementia, right? Dementia and Alzheimer's because of the way it does inflammation in the brain. So there's so many other parts of this plant, the hemp plant, remember, cannabis plant, that can be effective, and up to 100 more, right? So let's not forget these guys. So the question is, can we change the world, A little bit at a time, maybe. We launched a brand called Hempathy, which basically was self-care guided by nature. It's hemp seed oil. There's 3 generally accepted as safe, hemp parts, hemp protein, and hemp seed oil. So we launched this thing, and it's like a couple of SKUs of women's cosmetic beauty products, right? It was already there, I took it over. But what we did is we went out and said, we want to use it as a vanguard for changing the world. So we went out and got a licensing agency. We said, we want people to take everything to do with the woman's self-care towels, loofahs, slippers, robes, anything, and let's go build licensing. Let's go give people in those industries a reason to change as part of a bigger purpose. So Hempathy really wants to be the vanguard for that. Sure, if you want to buy these SKUs, great. But what it does is it gets us into conversation with retailers that says, what are you doing about those plastic bags? That's a problem. You're in New York City, you're not like LA, you're driving around everywhere, you got bags in your car. New York City, you don't. So what do you do with reusable, maybe hemp bags, something that's not as plastic? Look at the oceans, Four Oceans. If you don't know those guys, get to know them. The Four Oceans guys are amazing. And so basically we're trying to do it in a way that says, how do we revive hemp in a more contemporary, modern, engaging way for the group of people who buys everything online, who Snapchats their entire life, right? How do you do that? Because it can't be the old version of hemp, right? We're talking about clothing and textiles, right? And it can transform the landscape. So when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, I definitely want to go talk to these guys because you're the people that can help change the world. You are a zillion people that I'll be working with Hempathy forever to try to talk to. That says, wait a minute, you can change this stuff. I just look around and I say, what opportunities? This is you guys stuff. This is literally from your report from yesterday, Sustainability Boot Camp. The first step is the hardest. Nobody's talking about hemp and sustainability. Maybe they are, I don't know. But my guess is probably not. It's not on the radar yet. A friend of mine runs a big beverage company. I said, are you looking at CBD? He said, no, it's on our to-do list. I went on a safari. How many of you have been on a safari? I came back from safari, and everybody that I talked to said, yeah, that's on my bucket list. And I said, you need to move it from your bucket list to your to-do list. And that's the same thing about CBD and sustainability of hemp. You need to move it from your maybe someday I'm going to look at that list to holy crap, that could actually have an impact right now list. And that's the way we think about this stuff. Look at all these products, right? Henry Ford can make a car out of hemp. You guys know that? Henry Ford made a car out of hemp, right? I work with Styron at Dow, right, for automotive plastics, or for Alcoa. We're getting more aluminum into cars by lightweighting the car, dropping the center of gravity down so it's safer. You put more electronics in, all things people want. Guess what? You can do that with hemp. You can replace those materials with hemp. We're working now with Lehigh and Ford doing that kind of stuff. Textiles, right? Textiles, organic material, naturally antimicrobial. Imagine homes and hospitals with towels and washcloths that don't hold bacteria. And explain to me again why we haven't been able to do that because it was more dangerous than oxy. That's the truth. That's how crazy this is, guys. I'm telling you, which is why I go backwards. The outdoor industry aspires to become climate positive. If anybody was going to look at this conversation or this information and say, wait a minute, it's about saving the outdoors, it's about saving the planet, it's about enjoying the outdoors, it's about people who care about the outdoors being in it. It could be these people. Of course, this is the place we want you guys to see this. We want you to be the lighthouses that get it, to ask the questions. We can make skis, we know that. We can make skis out of this stuff, right? And your pet materials, right? Back to the cannabis. You can actually make pet shoes out of hemp. They'll last longer than anything we can make out of anything else in nylon today, right? So those are up there. Textiles, all Amazon, right? Amazon owns the world. Look at all those boxes. All you have to do is look at the Porch Pirates. Who's doing the hemp boxes to replace all those paper boxes? We're doing that. It's starting. But guys, this is like post-consumer recycle. Start with 5%. Start seeing what works, then move on, then go to 10, then go to 20. And over time it'll happen. I don't know how many of you are coming to the summer show. I'm assuming a lot of you. Look at the summer show. We know we can make that deck out of hemp. I got a guy who does it. I make that deck out of hemp. Why wouldn't you do that? All that outdoor furniture that's out there, you can make that out of hemp. Hempcrete. How many of you guys know about hempcrete? Stronger than concrete, negative carbon footprint, more insulation. I know people who put grows of hemp down in Puerto Rico and are rebuilding it out of hempcrete, right? So it's stronger. What's wrong with that? Is that worse than OxyContin? I don't think so. But for 80 years it was. So how do we drive progress? Number one, the first step is awareness, like anything else in the world, right? Awareness, interest, consideration, anything any human does. If you don't have some sort of awareness, nothing happens. This is awareness. This is a few people, right? You guys talk to somebody else. It's like the L'Oreal commercial. Tell a friend, tell a friend. Just get the conversation started, right? The consumers will continue, particularly the young ones, to demand sustainable alternatives. We know that, okay? They really give a shit about the planet. Then we look and we say the industries have to adopt and transform. We've seen how it works, right? It takes a long time. The relevant industries have to look at it. You guys have to look at it. People who are making stuff, people who are selling stuff. The capital expenses will have to be made. The good part of it is you have the tailwind of CSR and corporate social stuff and sustainability initiatives to help give a little more rationale as to why you're making that capital investment. The other thing is that the supply chain layers need to make it easy to convert. Okay, we know that from these industries. It has to run on the same machines. It has to come, if it's going to replace a nylon chip or a plastic chip, it needs to come in chips. It needs to be extruded through the same equipment and with very few change parts so that it can be put into the finished goods manufacturing machine without having to change it, not slowing it down. And so it's going to be a complex situation, but all those tests need to start happening so we can figure out how to turn it into the right size chip that goes into the machine that's already there. Because nobody wants to go buy a new $5 million finished goods making machine. Just give me hemp in a format that I can replace plastic or metal with. Then I'm happy, right? Then I'll do it. And think about digital transformation. In our lifetime, my lifetime, there are two things. Digital transformation, just look around at your phones, look around and we're talking, has changed everything. I honestly believe, and this is the truth, I truly believe this, the digital transformation and all that's meant to our life and world is the only other thing from a business standpoint that I have seen as much application of every business and every businesses do as I see in those 50,000 uses of hemp, not even including all the medical stuff that comes out of the other side of the business. And so it's massive, it's huge, it's going to take some time. We're unwinding 8 decades of time and bad material and bad information, right? But it can actually really do magical things in multiple ways. So from the social standpoint, right? These brands, Recess, IPA, Lagunas, which is nothing more than hot water with infused THC into it. I've worked for all the beer companies, right? If Miller Time becomes this, we know what alcohol does. Is this worse than alcohol? Well, no, it's really not. So what happens if somebody converts from 5 o'clock Miller Time into a beverage that's like that? It has no calories, etc. Then the opiate and anxiety, get people off Lexapro, opiates. I mean, come on, guys. It's a freaking crisis. And we're standing here looking at a potential solution. We need to do the tests. Let's fast track phase 1, phase 2 clinicals, get professional people. I was talking to Sanjay the other day flying back from LA to Atlanta. And the problem is all the people are so parochial about their own research, right? The doctors are, they all have their own studies and proofs and things like that. And then the stuff we're talking about here, the environment, 50,000 uses. The ones that get me the most are the homes and hospitals. And then I'm working with people that can replace Kevlar for bulletproof vests. So imagine a bulletproof vest that's stronger than Kevlar, lighter than Kevlar for the soldier who's wearing 31 pounds, more malleable, and it's from a negative carbon footprint. And explain why we wouldn't make bulletproof vests very soon out of hemp material. Why would we do that? And so when you hear these stories and you say, that's just wrong. That's just wrong. So I think we can actually do some stuff. This is me, I'm in LA, Atlanta, or 30,000 feet over somewhere. You can get me at Craig at Think Think, which is my company and the various companies I work with. But I would love if some of you guys want to join that journey or be a mouthpiece to other people that can do it, because we've got to get the first part is awareness. 2 years ago, before I walked into this city at Seed to Sale, I had no idea about any of this. But once you see it, it's like you can't unsee it, right? You see the old lady, new lady picture? Like once you see the old lady, you can't unsee her anymore, or the blue dress, red dress. Once you see it, now you're going, okay, I guess it is blue, right? That was yellow. And so, as soon as people really see this information, it's almost impossible to go back to an old way of thinking. And the reason we have the old way of thinking is because we've not been given an alternative. And this is in fact an alternative. It's alternative information. It's better information. And I think we can do some stuff. So I'd love if anybody can be a part of that journey, because this is my thing. I'm in. This is why I'm here. I'm in here to do whatever I can do to get the word to people, to help people that are doing the right things the right way, to do what they can do to help what I believe is an unbelievable opportunity for the world and for people to say. Any questions? We have a few minutes if you guys want to take some questions. Otherwise, you're free to go to lunch. But,